about other people at your table or even yourself? Are there certain things, attributes, experiences, good or bad, that you think may be shaping you in relation to your assignment? Any feedback on that? What are some of the inequalities that drive? Yeah, I'll give you a chocolate if you share. The Turkish delight. Good to see you listening. The question was, from these list of questions, are there things you discovered about yourself, like inequalities, injustices, experiences, good or bad, that may form part of your assignment? Yes? Yeah.
There's a lot of the way we relate to God and to others based upon upbringing. For me, it would have also included nationality, how I'm perceived by others based on my color. All of those kinds of things have come into play. My background, my parents were church pioneers, and so they loved God. They still do their but so they're really rough. But they taught us to, because there was a lot of racism the way I grew up. The climate was very volatile as people were, especially African Americans, gaining civil rights. But for us, we were perceived a certain way. But my parents always taught us that people who treat you that way didn't know the love of God yet. And so, because we did know the love of God, instead of carrying a chip on our shoulder and making ourselves defensive and creating a prison around our lives under the guise of self-preservation, that we were to just exhibit the love of God, pour out the love of God. Instead, kept our eyes clean. I found, and so in relating to others, it could come from a pure perspective, like what does God want for them? Yeah. What does God need for us to give to them?
Yeah.
So what do I have that I can bring?
That's great feedback, isn't that true? What amazing parents that you have. That's incredible. And it's true, we grow up in different cultures, different nationalities, and we have experiences as children, and obviously in our younger years, that help form our beliefs and our assignment. And it's such a big topic. I mean, you can explore this for hours. I mean, what beliefs did you have growing up? Let's say an easy one to pick is money. I mean, did you have parents that say money doesn't grow on trees? Like these funny sayings. The fact my dad actually told our kids money does grow on trees, and he used to go outside and peg like $5 notes on the trees, and his grandkids would go out there and pick the money off the trees. How funny is that? It ran out pretty quickly. The tree was withered pretty quickly. What about inequalities, injustices? Is there any of you in the room that there's an injustice that drives you? Yes? Oh, yes. Okay. What is it? What was some of the injustices that may drive you?
I was going to mention, when I was younger, I loved going to the dentist. But I know that for a lot
That's one of you, one of us in the room.
There's deliverance for that.
Yeah.
I think the difference because Australia, we've got a universal medical system, but we don't have one for dentistry. And I think that's one that really drove me towards the profession, because I just think what amazing things that we could do within the area of dentistry for people to change the world a smile at a time. So.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Isn't it like what I was speaking about before? We're all unique. Like I can't think of anything worse than going to the dentist, but yeah. Just be sorry, what's your name?
Jeremy.
Jeremy. Just be careful as you smile around him, okay? If he's staring at you, you know why. But isn't it awesome? That's just so unique that someone would love going to the dentist, but that's how God's wired you, you know? And to change, like a different perspective, change the world one at a time through a smile. How cool's that? All right, what else? Any other? Yes, sir?
We grew up in an area that was quite low economic, and a lot of drugs, a lot of single parents. My family all from a single parent family, but it's now we want to go in and just help people that are suffering, that are struggling, that are oppressed, that are just in poverty. You know, and we just want to go in and just be able to bless and give something back to the community.
Yep.
Show them that it's hope.
And isn't that good? So here, I want to relate it back to life experience or life training again. Sorry, what's your name? Tony. So in Tony's case, he's grown up in that environment. Who, just like Moses, who's the best person to go back and relate to those people? It's Tony. Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly right. It's like, who's that boxer, Manny Pacquiao? Same thing. He goes out there, does boxing, but he comes back to his community to sew back in. And they still relate to him because he grew up there. So it's so important we understand that from a life training point of view. Okay, anyone else?
I had, just in the second question, how did the family environment shape your beliefs and so on? I like pluses and minuses there. On one hand, I had a lack of parental role models and guidance and whatever. So as I've grown up and sort of gone through life, I've had difficulty sort of finding what I really wanted to do because my father had multiple jobs every few weeks, a few months or whatever. So that's been a bit of a negative. But on the other hand, we grew up out in the bush, like 40, 50 miles from the nearest town. So my father had to be able to do whatever job came along, whether it was mechanic, plumbing, fixing stuff, whatever the case may be. I mean, there was no yellow pages or call the plumber. I mean, whatever job needed to be done on the day, you had to know how to do it. So that's sort of filtered down into my life too. So in ministry, I've sort of found that I've been able to do whatever needed to be done on the day. So it's, been sort of pluses and minuses.
Yeah, well, isn't that good? It's so true. The pluses and the minuses work, and you can see that coming back, obviously, through your ministry. That applies to all of us, doesn't it? In some shape or form. One thing I wanted to mention, to give you just, it's good to have different perspectives. I mean, the environment I grew up in, my father was in the corporate world, and he climbed quite high in one of the banks, very high, in one of the biggest banks. And so naturally, when I left school, he said, what do you think he said to me? You should go into the bank, right? Okay. Just appreciate, stop giving cheek over there, thanks.
If all else fails, there's still Hollywood.
That's right. That's right. They need a eyebrow eating Mr. Bean. So I started in the bank. I was 18, and they put me on the inquiry counter, and it was next to a mental asylum. This is true. And the people got released every Thursday to come in and do the banking. And they put me as a junior out of school on the inquiry counter, and these people used to yell and scream at me about stuff I didn't understand. Anyway, I lasted 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks, I resigned. And this is what I'm saying. God puts a DNA in you. And so I went home and I said to my dad, I said, I've resigned. And he said, what are you doing? What do you mean you resigned? I said, and I actually believed it. I said, I've got enough experience now to do anything. Right? He said, what are you talking about? And I looked at him emphatically and said, Dad, I've got 6 weeks experience. What are you talking about? And I believed my own rubbish. I actually believed I could do anything. But here's the funny thing. The DNA in me was I was a risk taker. He was conservative, stay in the same job your whole life, and that's great. He's awesome. He's an awesome dad. But the DNA in me was I was a risk taker. So I would never last in that type of operation. And so I found very early on that I wanted to do multiple things at once, and that's what an entrepreneur does. I can't sit there and focus on one thing, okay? Because I end up eating my eyebrows, as you know. I had to do other things. And so that's what I'm saying. Sometimes your environment creates something in you that's the opposite. You know, I've seen people grow up in environments that are really strict, so they then do the opposite. They allow their children to do anything. So it does have a bearing on you discovering and executing your assignment. All right, what we're going to do now is I've got Dave Hodgson here. He's going to share with you how he found his assignment. And what's good about this is you'll hear from Dave and then Simone after we break. Think about the life skills and the life training that he talks about and how he actually finds his assignment. So this is going to start to glue it all together for you.
Day so far at the Goldie. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you today. You know, KI is just growing so fast around the world that we could just no longer get to every meeting. And I'm just so grateful to have great teachers and leaders like Dave and Simone and Leslie on board. These are people who have passed the tests from the Lord, and they've proven their willingness to build God's kingdom and not their own kingdoms. And that's so important these days and so rare these days, because it means that they have your interests at heart, and that's why I trust them so much. Also, the reason for having Dave, Leslie, myself and Simone all delivering similar messages is to show the same concept or topic from three different perspectives. Okay, so that will help you to see how each person found their assignment. Okay, so we're talking about finding your assignment, and that will involve me giving you a testimony. Many of you would have heard some of this in the past, but outside of the lessons on the KI membership side, I've not done sort of my testimony from the finding your assignment perspective for many years. So I'm going to add content that I would not normally have in there when I'm actually doing a testimony. Okay. Further to this, now that we have a whole library of content on the Kingdom Investors membership site, I'm going to refer to relevant lessons every now and again as I go through, because I know that these will help you find your assignment. And I actually know that from empirical data, from testimonies coming back and people telling me they've listened to all of our Finding Your Assignment stuff, but then gone on and listened to other lessons and joined all the dots, okay? So I know the ones they listen to, and so I'll tell you that as we go. Now, I'm going to do this in three sections, if you like. I'm going to explain it from the biblical concept and use a biblical example, as we always do. Then I'm going to give you a live SAS operation. As you all know, probably all know anyway, I was in the Special Forces, and I want to show you a Special Forces operation so I can put it into the perspective of knowing how important it is, how important the individual is in every assignment that we have. Now, you might think that's not conducive to actually finding your assignment, but it is in terms of if you understand that God's plan really can't go ahead unless everybody does their bit. And if you don't do your bit, he's going to have to train someone else up to do it, and other people are relying on you. And as you see each people doing their bit and you understand why it's them that has to do it, then you'll know what I'm talking about, okay? So that's why I'm adding that little story in. And then I'm going to give you the testimony to demonstrate the whole concept, which I'm sure Dave has already taught you so far, on about your life's training and your gifting. And I'm going to pick up those points all the way through the testimony, because those are the most important bits to finding your assignment. You guys, there's a spiritual logic here, okay? And look for the spiritual logic everywhere you go and everything you do. Don't worry about God moving in mysterious ways. That's not going to happen in the marketplace. Everything needs to stack up, because that's how we get our confidence to know that we're doing stuff. So it's all got to make sense spiritually. And that way you can then go through and do your assignment, which is going to be mission impossible, but doing it with confidence is so important. Okay, now, in stressing the importance of the individual, I'm talking, and I'm talking assignment, I'm talking about that which God wants you to do as distinct from the person sitting next to you. And Dave's obviously covered off on this, but again, three perspectives on the same subject. Noah, there's a flood coming, I need you to build an ark. Joseph, there's a famine coming, I need you to get my people into Goshen in the Nile Delta of Egypt. Moses, there's an emancipation or a freedom coming, get my people into the promised land. Esther, there's a genocide coming, make supplication to the king, protect us, help us. Dave Hodgson, there's a change in culture coming in the marketplace. I'm bringing the kingdom of God into the earth through the concept of sheep nations. Get out there and lead this. Okay, so these are all strategic assignments that the Lord has given to biblical figures and to modern figures such as me and many and all of you. And it all comes under a broader overarching vision of creating sheep nations in the earth that the Lord wants. We can liken this to the workplace in the modern era. For those of you to whom this is a new concept, many of you would have heard it before, but to those of you it's a new concept, let's liken it to you getting a job as marketing manager at, say, Amazon, at the big Amazon company. So you can turn up at work and you'll find there's a general code of conduct there, which you have to live and operate by at Amazon. So there's going to be no stealing, you can't steal the computers and take them home, there's no sexist behaviour, there's no smoking in the office, you've got to show up on time, no private phone calls, dress appropriately, you name it, all the different bits and pieces of the generic code of conduct by which you operate by if you come and work for Amazon. But that's not why you're there, okay? You're there to be the marketing manager, and if you don't do your job as marketing manager, the boss is going to be angry and he's going to sack you, because if he doesn't, the whole corporation's going to collapse. It's got to have marketing, and you're a strategic part of that. So it wouldn't make sense for you to be there and not do your job. You wouldn't get paid, and a lot of people are going to be relying on you to keep their jobs. Okay? It's exactly the same in Christianity. You can go to church, you can live by the Christian code of conduct, you can be a good person by not stealing, by not committing adultery, you're tithing, you're serving the church, you're loving your neighbour, all the different generic things that Christians are supposed to do. But unless you do what you were put here on the earth to do, it doesn't make sense for you to be there, and your Christianity will have no purpose and it just actually won't make sense. You'll be frustrated with your faith. One of the greatest things I find when people join KI is they say to me, until now I've been so frustrated with my faith in the marketplace. I just haven't known where I fit it in, what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm trying to get people all saved and go to church, and yet I don't know how to do that because there's no purpose in doing that. They just all go to church and just become hypocrites. Okay, so I'm not saying everyone who goes to church is a hypocrite. I'm just saying if we don't add this gospel of the kingdom to what we've just done in salvation, and nobody changes and gets on with their assignments and so on, nothing is going to be repaired in the world. But unless you do what God has put you on this earth to do, it does not make sense for you to be here, and your Christianity will have no purpose and will not make sense, and you'll be frustrated in your faith, and you're definitely won't be pleasing the boss. We're going to have to answer to the Lord one day, okay? Ultimately, I find so many Christians who don't know their assignment, they just lose their faith and they disappear off back into the world. Backsliding, we call it. All right? Now, as you know, your assignment revolves around two important and obvious things. That is your specific giftings, that which you are good at, and your life's training. So, you've all heard about giftings a million times in church because pastors teach on it a lot, mostly associated with your spiritual giftings and so on. And that's awesome stuff. I don't want to dwell on that long. I'm sure Dave's covered off on it. But in this case, I'm talking about pretty much that which you are good at, that which God put into your DNA that actually makes you good at things. If you consider that we're all different, we're all a biological mechanism or organism, and we all have a bent or a lean to do stuff that we're actually passionate about, we do it, we're good at it, and we thrive and we prosper when we do it. And so that is deliberate. That is by no means some generic random thing that just grew out of mud. Okay, God programmed us in certain directions so that we can be good at stuff to do our assignments. Moses, for example, was a great leader. Without that gifting, how was he going to lead 2 million Jews through the desert? I'm an entrepreneur and a leader and a teacher. That's how God deliberately designed me. So I deliberately build businesses and I teach and I lead, okay? Because I know that's what I'm good at. I'm not good at a lot of other things, but it certainly makes sense for me to do what I'm good at because that is actually what he intended. An analogy I like to use is the concept of the Learjet, the private jet. If you wanted to go from the Goldie down to Melbourne and you were given a private jet and a pilot to do it, and you jumped in that and said, okay, drive down, let's go through Coolangatta and head down through Tweed Heads and, down past Coffs Harbour there, is on the road, okay, it's going to be crazy. It's going to overheat, it's going to make such a noise, the cops are going to arrest you, wings are going to knock people off their bicycles, you can't park it, you can't reverse it, you're just basically never going to get there, okay, simply because it's not designed for that. But if you jumped in it and flew the thing there, you'd be there in an hour and a half. And that's because that's what it was designed for, and exactly the same with you. You are designed for certain things. Everything else, all the other bits and pieces that are peripheral, yeah, sure, do all of those. But your assignment is going to be associated with what you're good at. It just makes spiritual sense. Let's go on to the life's training, because that is so important. And we tend to look at our life's training as Christians, and this has come from, pastors' hearts, which is awesome. You look after people that are emotionally, stressed out and anxious and suicidal, all that sort of stuff. Absolutely, I get that. But I'm encouraging you to change that. Look back on your life's training, your life's experience, whether you've been molested, whether you've been bullied, whatever it might be. Look upon this as training for now. Okay, and then you'll have a whole new mindset when you look and say, wow, that has equipped me for today. And when I give you my testimony, you'll see what I'm talking about, because all the adversity and all the disappointment and all the rejection and everything that I went through, lots of people have committed suicide, lots of people have gotten PTSD and committed suicide, lots of people have done different stuff with what they've been trained, which was actually their training. Okay, so try and look at it from the perspective of, thank you, Lord, that now it was horrible at the time, but I'm through it. I've been through this, starvation period. I've been through this economic downturn. I've been through bankruptcy. I haven't, but you may have, and so on. Okay, all for now. So it's a collection of your life's experiences and everything that's happened to you. Here we go with Moses again. He had a lot of training before he was summoned to do his assignment. 40 years in the palace of Pharaoh, 40 years in the deserts of Midian, and so on. My life's training has been 64 years of absolute adversity. Boarding school from when I was 4 years old, nearly 10 years in the special forces, as a mercenary, all kinds of adversity, which you wouldn't want people to go through. But it has equipped me for now, because as I lead the world into creating sheep nations, there's a huge backlash. I better be able to withstand that backlash. I'm trying to take greed out of a Babylonian economy that's driven by the whole world by greed. Okay, it's dominated this market since Noah and the flood, literally. So there's going to be a backlash. I better be well trained to handle this enemy. So that's why it's so important to understand your life's experience. We all know our life's experience, but it's important for us to put it into this context of finding your assignment and then using it. All right? Now remember also, your assignment is always going to be mission impossible. This is such an important criteria to finding your assignment. The Lord may deliver it to you in stages, especially if it's a really big one. But still, in that process, even the pieces it gives you are going to seem impossible. They're going to seem beyond your natural reach. And of course, they are going to be beyond your natural reach. If it was not impossible, whereby we could do it in our own strength and we didn't need God, then the devil would stop us in a heartbeat. Okay? So we need God, we need to attract His favor. It's the old story, by doing His assignment, by doing the assignment, you're doing His will. If you do it His way, you will attract the favor, okay? And it's the favor that's going to protect you from the enemy. It's the favor of God that the devil can never penetrate, because you're going to find that as you do your assignment, there's going to be a backlash against your assignment. The devil does not want you to do your assignment. You're always going to be attacked in the area of your assignment. I get attacked by ASIC, by the tax office, by people criticizing me, my integrity, and my assignment is all about integrity. Okay, we've been through all of that, so I know what it's like. I'm talking from experience. And then, of course, the obvious thing is it has to be you who does your assignment, because your gifting is unique and specific to you, and your life's training is unique and is specific to you. And if you don't combine that mixture, someone else is going to have to do that and get trained up and do it on your behalf. Okay. Great, so let's do some biblical background. I'm talking a bit fast because Cardinal David Leslie has only given me a short time to get this in his program. He's got a great program and he doesn't want me rabbiting on for hours. Okay, but in terms of scripture, the great example that I always think is a good one is the Joseph journey. And that is because Joseph was pretty much a business guy. We're generally electing to a business audience and so on. And of course, he's probably the first guy, in my opinion, who ever really completed his assignment. Once from when he was activated by the Lord through the dreams, and then carried it out to the end and didn't waver along the way. All the great patriarchs before him, you'll find where they fell. Not necessarily even fell, but where they got tired, where they got old, where they never completed. Okay, Joseph actually got to the end of it. So that's really important. And there are reasons why that happened. Okay, three main reasons I would say that he achieved his assignment before anybody else had. The first one, he understood and he accepted the assignment because he knew how to interpret dreams. That was his gifting, okay? That was one of his main physical gifts, that he was good at interpreting dreams. Nobody else understood these two dreams that he got except Joseph himself. Just want you to remember that he received these dreams when he was 17. I get a lot of people saying to me, oh, assignments don't start till you're 30, Jesus started when he was 30, and so on and so on. I think Jesus started when he was 12. I don't have time to go into that now, but if you go onto the website and watch the Activating Your Assignment lessons there on the KI membership site, you'll see what I'm talking about. Josiah was 12, Solomon was 12, Jesus was 12 when he was peeing those people in the temple, and so on. Okay, they were all men, socially and physically equipped to do their assignments. So here's this guy getting these dreams when he's 17, and he's explaining them to his family, and nobody in his family understands. His father Jacob says, do you believe that your mother and I will bow down to you? Now, Joseph knew full well it was nothing to do with his mother bowing down to him, because his mother was dead, right? So she had been dead. Rachel had been dead for probably 3 years by the time Joseph was 17. She died giving birth to his younger brother, Benjamin, 3 years earlier. It was to do with a huge famine coming, and he would provide the solutions. All of the nations, including Egypt, coming under his authority, and him ushering in the tribes of Israel to take dominion over what we would probably call the mountain of economics today. So in other words, dominion over Egypt, the great power of the day, which had corrupted Abraham, taken him off his assignment 250 years earlier. So there's a lot more in that. But the point being that he knew what the dreams meant, okay? He also, the second reason he did so well is he knew it was he who had to do this assignment. He knew it had to be him, because he knew he had a gift of management, and also he had a measure of moral rectitude that was required for a job of this magnitude. It was a huge assignment, utterly mission impossible. And you would expect, one of these assignments like this to fall onto his older brothers, because, starting at the top, his oldest brothers were a long way. Reuben would have been 10 or more years older than him. I can't remember the stats, but he's quite a lot older than Joseph. And yet it never fell to these older brothers, because they were steeped in sin and bad management of the family's affairs. They had failed the tests that the Lord had set before them, and that's why the Lord never called them to these kind of assignments. This is another real big key, ladies and gents. Know the tests that are coming your way that are going to help you to give you direction to your assignment. I need to do a full lecture on this, which I've never done before, but I know in hindsight I recognize the tests that I had to pass, and had I known that, had I been taught that, to look back and look at these tests, I would have known what the Lord was testing me for. And then I would have known, okay, my assignment is collated to these tests that I've had to pass. They're all different. People have different tests. Some of them are tested in lust, some of them are tested in mammon, some of them are tested in this, that, and the other. Some of them are tested in endurance. There's all different kinds of tests that we need to pass. And join those dots, and you'll start to find where your assignment's going. Okay? Let's have a look at Reuben quickly, because this will help us identify why it was Joseph and why it needs to be you that does yours. Reuben, by the time Joseph had gotten these two dreams, had already slept with Jacob's wife, Bilhah. So if you think about that in the broader picture, he slept with his stepmother. He's never going to get past Potiphar's wife. Okay, Potiphar's wife was a beautiful woman. She was very licentious, probably married to a eunuch. Here comes a handsome young guy. She's going to be all over this guy, and he's already slept with, his morals are so low. He's already slept with his father's stepmother, which is utterly unheard of, okay, or shouldn't be that way. Anyway, he did that, so he's never going to get this job. Simeon and Levi are the next two oldest brothers in line. Volatile crazies. They killed the Shechemites. That's the equivalent to a modern-day international crisis. There's no way they could have managed the fickle and complex Egyptian political system or political scene as it was during the Hyksos era, or the Hyksos dynasty that was going on at the time. And at that time, Pharaoh was not an Egyptian, okay? So it was always a fickle thing when you've got a ruler who's not native to that land. Of course, the Egyptians viewed the Hebrews as nomadic shepherds who in their mind were bottom-end homeless hippies, all right? They're kind of what we would say on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, but in a caste-type setting, where you don't even get a vote, you don't even get a voice, you don't get anything. So you can imagine these two guys trying to run that economy as hippie nomads coming in. Okay. okay? The other thing is, of course, that what Joseph had to do there was interfere with the fiscal modelling completely. He doubled the taxation commitments of the people during the good years, okay? And that is a delicate operation. These guys were way too crazy to be able to manage that. So there's no way they could have done it. Judah was next in line. Now, you know him, okay? He'd already, he married Canaanite women, and then shortly after that he went and slept with his daughter-in-law Tamar, okay? And in that exercise, he had given her the symbols of his identity. Okay, so again, he's never going to get past Potiphar's wife. If illicit sex is more important to you than your identity, don't even begin your assignment, okay? Those are the tests you're going to have to pass. God knew what tests these people were going to have to pass. That's why he tests them, and they failed, all right? So he would have failed at every challenge. The next brothers in line, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, those are the next four eldest ones. They were doing evil. You might remember Joseph was already in charge of his older brothers, again, very rare. He was in charge of them and sending their old man, reports on how bad these guys were, what they were doing. In fact, they were selling the sheep, the family sheep, to visiting caravans as they came through out the back door. That's called corruption, okay? And this whole thing, is going to have to be managed on righteousness, because you've got this 7 years of prosperity coming that has to be managed for the community at large, not for greed and self-centeredness. And those guys would never have got anywhere near it. And obviously then the third reason why Joseph achieved his assignment is because he knew he couldn't fail, because everyone was relying on him to come through. This must have been so frustrating. He knew his family was going to rely on him. He knew they had to come under him. This was the concept of them bowing down before him. They had to come under his authority so that he could make sure they all fitted in well and were fed and looked after. And if he didn't do his assignment, they were going to starve. And yet they were throwing him in a pit and selling him to slaves. He must have been going mad, saying, "You guys, I love you, I want to fix you, I want to help you." And yet all this is going on. But he went on and did it. Okay? So the point is, guys, that we each have a specific and a unique task or tasks to fulfill, and many others in the nation are relying on you and me not to give up and not to be concerned that it's a mission impossible. The one big thing I really want to stress here, guys, and I stress it every time we do these Finding Your Assignment lessons, just work within your own capacity and your own gifting. You don't all have to, take over the economy of Egypt and build an ark and go and make supplication to the king and threaten your life and getting killed if he doesn't accept you and so on. These are just great biblical figures that I'm using because we all know the examples. So essentially then, you just work within your gift mix and with the assignment that God gives you. It will be mission impossible, but you will be able to do it because he has trained you for it. Okay? Now, here's a slide by Oz Hillman that I'd like you to read. And that leads me on to the SAS operation that I wanted to bring to your attention. Now, on this map, you'll see that I fought in the Special Forces in a country called Rhodesia, and it was surrounded by countries that had declared war on it. And so there were terrorists being sent into our country from Zambia to the north and from Mozambique to the northeast, and they were crossing the Zambezi River. They were coming through on three big, large ferries virtually every night of the week, and these ferries were big vessels. They were like 60, 70 feet long, and they were carrying hundreds of terrorists across into our country. These terrorists were invading us. They were massive armies, they were much, much bigger than us, and they were coming in, they were killing our civilians, attacking our farmers, attacking our military installations. Okay, so one day a small team of 18 men arrived at Kanyemba, which is where the three countries meet here at this point. 10 of them were left behind at Kanyemba to set up camp and set up our support base. And that now meant there were 8 of us left to go out and do this operation. The operation, the assignment, was to go out and blow up those ferries on the other side of the river. They were based in a town called Zumbo on the northern bank of the Zambezi River. At this junction, you can see the Luangwa River coming in from the north, and then the Zambezi coming in, of course, from west to east. Now, the Zambezi is the 4th biggest river in the world. You cannot swim across it. It's full of crocodiles. It's flowing fast. It's just a crazy place. We've got to get across that river. We've got to get across there at night time. We've got to try and infiltrate and blow up those ferries before we get found and get back again. So we did this on a Friday night. 8 of us got in those canoes and paddled across the Zambezi. Now these are very highly trained, gifted SAS men, and we crossed the river in canoes to go onto the northern bank, the Mozambique side of the Zambezi River. And the reason I mentioned we're very highly trained is because that was our life's training up to that point, okay? We left 2 people then to guard our canoes, and now it's down to just 6 of us to go out and carry out this assignment. We crossed into Mozambique and we came to the fortified town of Zumbo. We went all the way along this pathway in the bush. When we got there, we had to sneak undetected through the Frelimo base. So we left 2 people on the outside of Zumbo to guard our escape, because that was the way out back to the canoes in the dark. Okay, so now we're down only to 4 of us. We went through the garrison. There's over 1,000 troops in this garrison. Frelimo and ZANU terrorists are waiting to be shipped into Rhodesia the next day. It was late at night. It was a Friday night. It was, we were hoping that most of them had too much to drink, because that's what generally happens. And obviously, even in war zones, they have a bit of a beer. This was a 14-year war. It lasted so long. These guys would have had a few beers, we hoped, and they had. So we were sneaking through over 1,000 enemy troops, and we're only 4 of us, okay, off to do our assignment. Eventually we crept past these troops down through and down onto where the ferries were. There was this big pile of bottles. It was like a rubbish dump. We left 2 guys there, and it was those 2 guys that could have, one of them anyway, who was trained in demolitions, who could have replaced the 2 of us who had to go onto those ferries. If one of us got shot, then one of these guys could come on and help, and the other one would protect us. But now it's down to just 2 people, okay, going onto those ferries, myself and one other guy. So we went on there. We had to go in there onto each boat. There's all sorts of troops on there lying, sleeping, waiting to be ferried into Rhodesia the next day. We had to lay the charges on the engines. We had to lay them on the diesel fuel tanks, on those charges, go onto the next ferry, do the same on the next ferry without waking anyone up, without causing a ruckus, and sneak out of there. This is a very dangerous, mission impossible, ridiculous assignment, okay? But we did it, and we did a lot of it. So, all those civilians back in Rhodesia, all the farmers, all the military installations, they are all out at their parties. They're all out Friday night. They were at the clubs and everything, but they're all relying on narrowing right down to 2 hand-picked, specifically trained guys who have gone through a lifetime of adversity, highly skilled in demolitions, specially trained for this type of assignment. They are relying on us to come through, whether they knew it or not, and in fact very few of them knew it, and only our headquarters staff would have known about it. So we did our job, and then we came back out, and we collected the 2 guys that were by the bottle tip. Then we snuck back through all of those sleeping troops again, collected the 2 guys that were outside, right at the edge of Zumbo. And then we went back through the bush path, collected the other 2 guys, and got into the canoes and went back across the Zambezi River. And round about first light, the whole thing blew up, and those ferries were sunk and so on. Guys, we will never know how effective that was in terms of how many lives were saved, but it would have been in the thousands, because it took them nearly 3 years to get more ferries out from China and rebuild them and make them, as far as possible, resistant against that kind of attack again. But the point is, it had to be us who did that, exactly the same as it has to be you who does your assignment. Okay? So I hope you get the real importance of the individual in every assignment. That assignment there, it's important to understand that there was a team of us. There were 18 of us, 10 guys to look after the base camp. That means to protect it. That's our covering, to get back out of there. There are signals, there's communications people, there are medics, there are all different ones that are in there, boat squadron guys who look after the canoes, all in that 10 people that stayed behind. Then the 8 that came over, those guys are qualified in different things, Morse code, medics, all sorts of things. And 3 of us actually were qualified very much in the demolition side. And if you look at this last slide here, here's a picture of us afterwards. This is myself here, back in the days when I was still young and beautiful and stupid of mind. The guy next to me is John Haynes, little John. He was a short little guy. Him and I did most of the demolitions work in the SAS for many years in Rhodesia. This guy over here is Mac McIntosh. He was the lieutenant in charge of the operation. He was hiding by those bottles. He was also trained in DEMS, and he could have replaced any of us 2 on those ferries. This guy on the right here, that's Dumpy LaRue. He's dead now, and Mac McIntosh is dead. He was killed later in the battle. Dumpy's dead as well. He was He looks a bit fat or prosperous there for an SAS guy, but that's because he wasn't live on ops. He was looking after the canoes, didn't have to be as fit as the rest of us. Okay, and obviously this little circle of beers is our reward. It's a return on investment. Thirsty work. Okay, so let me bring this into the modern marketplace context, guys. Let me give you a testimony so that I can show you my life's experience and my gifting, and all the way through I'll point that out because they're so crucial to helping you understand your assignment. So I grew up in Zambia, in Central Africa, just one country just south of the Congo, which is now Democratic Republic of Congo, in those days called the Belgian Congo. I grew up with black people there. I had very few white friends, and lots of white kids, but I naturally gravitated to the black people. This was in the 1950s, and I literally became a white-black kid. I learned the bush, I learned to track and to trap and to make string and to make fire and to do everything, live off the bush. I didn't need food. I spoke the language fluently, and my first language was Bemba. It wasn't English. I only spoke English to my parents, and it was not good English. Okay, so that's how my formative years were, and that was very, very important as I grew up, because this is life's training, and it's very, very important to me now as I take on Babylon. Okay, when I was 4 years old, I was sent to boarding school in South Africa. Now, that was because the independence movements were sweeping south across Africa. Britain and Belgium and the Portuguese and the French and the Germans were decolonizing the continent. And there was just a bloodbath everywhere they pulled out of. So my parents, we were next in line in Rhodesia, where I lived in Zambia, and my parents were worried, so they sent me to boarding school in South Africa. It's 4,000 kilometers away, and it was on a train. They just put me on a train in January and said, see you later. See you in June when you come home. 6 months later, that train took 10 days to get to school, old steel trains, across 4 countries, completely unescorted. The only time the teachers got on the train was when we crossed the South African border. Some of those countries were hostile to white kids. Okay, so and when I got to South Africa, I didn't speak English, I didn't speak Afrikaans. This was in the southern tip of Africa, right out in the Cape Province. And the town that we went to school in, or I went to school in, was an Afrikaans-speaking town. Very, very conservative, very apartheid-driven. To them, black people weren't even human beings. Here comes a kid that only speaks Bemba. I go out to look for the black kids. They ran away because they're terrified of a white kid coming to them. And the white kids all ganged up and beat my brains out because who's this guy coming looking white, but he's pro-black, etc., etc. So I got bullied and beaten from the time I was 4 years old onwards. Okay, nobody to help, and that went on. But because of that, I had to learn to fight, I had to learn to retaliate, I had to learn to fight back, and I became stronger and stronger at that, and a better fighter, so that many years later, that benefited me so much when it came into the war years and when it came to doing my assignment today, understanding all of the rejection, how to weather it, how to get through it, and so on. Okay, in 1965, my parents moved from Zambia. They moved down to Rhodesia, what was then Rhodesia. It's now called Zimbabwe. And I was coming up from school, and they said, "Oh, we live here now. You can go to school in Rhodesia." And they still sent me to boarding school, but it was quite close to home because my dad lived on a prison farm as a prison officer. So for me, it was a case of, okay, great, you know, I'm now back into Rhodesia. At least it's not an apartheid place. By now, I'd learned to speak English and Afrikaans. And very quickly I learned to speak the black language, the main black language in Rhodesia, which was Shona. And of course I befriended the black kids. There was no apartheid. We could all live together. We could all intermarry. It was a whole different world. So having black kids as mates was great. Again, I learned the Rhodesian bush, very similar to the Zambian bush anyway. And I was utterly familiar with the bush and intimate with it. Again, very important as I carried on with life. Now, in 1965, the Rhodesia declared independence from the UK illegally in the mind of the UK, and all the neighbouring countries declared war on us. Don't have time to go into that now, but what it meant was that when we left school, we had to go straight to the war. By the time I got to the war, it was in the early 1970s. The war had been going on for a long time, already as long as World War II. That war went on for 3 times as long as World War II, and it was very intense. It was every day, okay, for us. And I fought the war for 9.5, nearly 10 years. So I joined the army a bit early because my girlfriend was pregnant when we were at school, and I needed to we wanted to get married and we weren't allowed to get married because my parents said, no, you guys are too young. We're both 16 at the time. So, but we still planned to get married, and when we were old enough, which was when we were 18. So I had to go to the army and she had to go to a maternity home. That meant that she needed maternity fees and all sorts of stuff, maintenance and everything else, and I had to go to the army where there was not much pay. So in that process, I joined the SAS. Okay, so you know that my gifting is I'm an entrepreneur. Okay, I mentioned that earlier. So as an entrepreneur, the first thing I thought when I joined that war as a national serviceman, we had to do 2 years. So the first thing I joined is how am I going to make money out of this war to fund my new family that's going to be born soon. And so that was why I joined the SAS, for the money. It was also beneficial to join them because they were the ones who stayed alive the longest, because they were the most professional as far as soldiers went. So you're better off getting in if you could get in. Very hard to get in. Okay, but I joined the SAS and I did get in as a 17-year-old. You're not allowed to get shot in the Rhodesian Army until you turn 18. So as a 17-year-old, I passed all the selection courses into the SAS. I was getting good pay, but then I had a whole year of training because I couldn't go to war yet. I was too young. When the SAS train you, if it's for a year, man, they are so intense. They jam everything into you, and everything's physical and mental and overload of the human body and mind. It's beyond normal. And so by the time I came out of that a year later, I was exceptionally well trained, but I was still inexperienced, obviously. But that training was so important to me. It taught me endurance. It taught me all kinds of things, how to lead. It taught me leadership. I was leading men much older than myself who had fought wars all over the world and had come to join the Rhodesian War because they believed in the cause of fighting against communism, which is what we're physically fighting against. And I led those men as an 18-year-old, mainly because I knew the bush so well, I knew how the terrorists operated so well and all that sort of stuff. And I had a natural gift of leadership. So collectively, all of this added up for me to use later. It's all part of my assignment for later. Now, in the SAS, I did all manner of operations, working behind enemy lines, attacking the enemy, blowing up bridges and ferries and planes, and all kinds of things like that. Here's a quick story here. This is in the forward of a book about it's called The Elite, the story of the Rhodesian SAS. This is Barbara Cole. Her husband, Pete Cole, was one of the officers. He only died quite recently. Rhodesian Special Air Service, one of the most formidable fighting forces in the world, operated almost exclusively across the border during the long, bitter Bush War, undertaking deep penetration missions against insurgents being harboured inside neighbouring Mozambique and Zambia. Fought against the magic and madness of a changing Africa, against insuperable odds, against two terrorist armies who were aided and abetted by the armies of their host nations and backed by Russia and China, two of the world's superpowers. The role of the SAS was unique. Some of their exploits may seem far-fetched, even impossible, hence the ferries, okay? But then truth is often stranger than fiction. It's a history of high adventure and daring, courage and humanism, be it driving through the streets of a neighbouring city, walking bold as brass down the streets of another, knocking out trains, bridges and vital installations, or swooping out of the morning skies. That means parachuting in, free-fall parachuting in. And then with the ability to hit hard and fast, attacking and taking their leave, the devastation complete, the mission accomplished. Nowhere was out of reach or safe from SAS attack, and no target was too big. Okay, so you can see from all of that and I'm not glorifying war at all, guys. I'm just simply showing you my life's training, but that is what it taught me, that nowhere is out of reach from us as kingdom operators. No target is too big. If the enemy's here, we need to go and take out the enemy. In the modern era, the spiritual enemy, I'm talking about, not people, of course. Nothing is too big that we can't take it out. And I learned that in a physical sense for 9.5 years, fighting this crazy war, incredibly outnumbered and so on. Okay, and when I joined that unit, there were only 40 of us operational during that first couple of years that I was there. Literally 40 of us operational. The Rhodesian SAS, if you read war books and then look through the annals of history, military history, you'll find that throughout the 1970s and the second half of the 1960s, we were regarded as the finest anti-terrorist unit in the world. That was mainly because we did it every day, fighting every day. And there's so many books are written about it, so many military units, Australia, the US, all the special forces based so much of their training and teaching on what we did there. Okay? Again, just showing you the importance of life's training. Now, one bit I left out was after, I was kept incommunicado from my girlfriend because they didn't want us to try and get married, and in the SAS, their philosophy is you concentrate on the job, not your girlfriend who's pregnant. So I could never get hold of her for that whole year. And she had the baby and she's waiting, when's this guy going to come and marry me, and so on. And of course I was kept incommunicado, and one day I think she just thought I was never coming back. And she got married to another guy, and the other guy adopted the baby. I was deep inside Mozambique on operations, and of course my brother actually sent me a Morse code. My brother was in the police in special branch, and that was the reason why he could send me a message in the SAS. It came through the system, and I got it deep inside Mozambique. 6 weeks to walk back, I couldn't go back. And he told me, yeehaw, your girlfriend got married and the baby's been adopted, you don't have to pay maintenance anymore. So that was his mindset. He didn't know what's going on inside me. All that rejection as a kid, as a young boy, never ever left me. It was always there. When you're rejected, when you perceive to be rejected by your parents, it's hard. Then you're rejected by your peers and your friends, and living alone, and all the stuff that had happened to me was always inside me, even in those SAS days. And now add 2 cups of anger and more rejection to the whole deal, and you have a bit of a messed up kid, So it takes 6 weeks to get back from where I was. Only 3 of us out there on ops blowing something up. It's a very slow journey. You've got to stay hidden, trying to get back all the way through Mozambique and back through the northern part of Rhodesia and so on. And by the time I got back, I'd kind of come to the conclusion there's no point in following up on this. You can't unmarry people. This little baby's now got a different father. I'd never ever seen him. He was born on Christmas Day in 1973, and I never ever saw them again. But it was one of the biggest things in my life to cope with, which has stood me in stead ever since. Okay, so that's what happened to me. So when you're thinking back on your own lives, think of the adversity you've had, think of the adversity I've had, and see where it fits in, where you can overcome this overwhelming disappointment and emotional hardship, and take it as training. Don't take it as, this is a reason to commit suicide or something. Take it as training. Anyway, because I was so aggressive and such a nasty little piece of work, I had too many punch-ups in the SAS, which is not a good place to have punch-ups. They're pretty good at that. But anyway, I did. And eventually the squadron sergeant major called me in, and he said, if you have any more fights in this unit, I'm going to send you to the School of Infantry for 12 months, and you can go and train recruits and get your aggression out that way. So that was a threat that I couldn't handle. Going to train recruits is probably the worst thing for an operational SAS soldier. I'd rather have been shot in the leg, So I decided it was a good time to take my leave, and there was another special forces in the Rhodesian Army called the Selous Scouts, S-E-L-O-U-S, Scouts. You can Google them up and see it. They were the most amazing unit. They came up and offered me a job there, a position there. And so I accepted that, and I went and I did their selection course, and then I joined the Selous Scouts. Now the Scouts were a very, very different unit to the SAS. Most of the troops in the Selous Scouts were Indigenous men. Obviously I'm not Indigenous. I was actually born in London. I got to Africa when I was 1, but I was as Indigenous, if not more so, other than my place of birth and my colour of skin and eyes. I spoke the language. I knew the bush as well, if not better than most of them, because I had an academic approach as well as the subsistence approach and Indigenous approach and so on. So I could become one of them, and what they did is they were trained to become terrorists. So we were trained to become the enemy as terrorists, and we then infiltrated the terrorist ranks and we killed them from the inside. And I operated as a Selous Scouts operator for the next 4 years, nearly as long as World War II, doing that. And that is exactly what Joseph did, okay? He went to Daniel did, going to the University of the Chaldeans, the most pagan university in the world, dressed like them, looked like them, wore makeup, looked like a queen, modern day interpretation of a queen dressing, and so on, but certainly counterculture to the Jewish culture is how he would address that. He infiltrated their ranks, and he had influenced the next 3 emperors for decades ahead, okay? When we had finished the selection course in the Selous Scouts, they took us on what they called the dark phase, and during that dark phase is when they taught us everything about being a terrorist. It's so important. I mean, you couldn't even go even if we're out on operations. So the modus operandi is there's a terrorist group in the area, and they operate in a certain size, usually a patrol commander, a political commissar. His job is to do all the indoctrination of the masses, the locals, the local indigenous people, and indoctrinate them in a communist fashion. And then there were 9 cadres. So there's a patrol of 11 terrorists, and they swamp the country in all the rural areas. We have to come in as a new patrol of 11 terrorists, and we have to now infiltrate the rank that's already there, the group that's already there, by going to the villages and saying, hey, we're new in the area, we're coming to bring pay for these guys, new instructions, reinforcements, medicine, etc., etc., and we want to meet the group. And that way we infiltrate the group and then we kill them from the inside. So the terrorists set up structures because they knew about us, obviously. Didn't take long for that to spread around on how we were working and so on. So they might say to this villager, okay, if a group comes in, new group comes in, don't give them chicken, okay, or give them chicken, and when we come, we won't accept chicken. But if they accept chicken, we know that they salute scouts. So any other terrorist group that's a proper terrorist group, you know, we won't take chicken because we know it's like a password. So this is just one of the methods that we had to know. It was so dangerous, so delicate, but we did that, okay. Most amazing, 68% of all kills, of all enemy soldiers killed in the Rhodesian army came from this one unit doing that kind of what they call pseudo operations, and we led the world in that, obviously. Okay, so I did that for the next 4 years, and here's a quick thing from the Zulu Scouts Association website. Actually, it's from a website in the US which trains tracking and so on. We were experts in the bush, we did a lot of tracking and etc. I've trained the Aussie Army in tracking, by the way. Okay, the Zulu Scouts training and operational doctrine inculcated audacity and an intimate knowledge of the enemy. This was so important to me in my modern day assignment, knowing the enemy. I've taught on knowing the enemy right around the world and recognised now as an authority around the world. People reference my lectures. I've watched people do my lectures when they didn't even know I was in the audience. Big shots in the US, which is good. I mean, it means that what we're teaching is getting around. Okay. At various times, for example, white Zulu Scouts posed as the prisoners of black Zulu Scout terrorists and were escorted into terrorist strongholds where white prisoners were highly prized. At the appropriate moment, the Zulu Scouts turned their weapons on the terrorists, wreaking havoc from within. The classic example of audacity and an intimate knowledge of the enemy was the Zulu Scouts' raid on the large Zanla terrorist camp at Nyanzonya Pumwe in August 1976. So this is deep inside Mozambique, by the way. Using unimogs and ferrets painted in Frelimo camouflage, 84 Zulu Scouts penetrated Mozambique and drove directly into a large terrorist camp. Remember now, there's only 84 of us, eh? Thousands of terrorists were in the camp preparing for morning formations when the Scouts opened fire with all their hardware. It's all listed here. Estimates of the number of terrorists killed ran as high as 1,000, all for 5 slightly wounded Zulu Scouts. As the Scouts withdrew to Rhodesia, they blew up the Pumwe River Bridge behind them. Frustrating pursuit. Okay, so I've been trained especially by God, and I mean especially for this time. This life training is so important. I've been trained to understand the enemy. When I became a Christian, I found that the Christians had no idea who the enemy was. And of course, they were, because of that, they just weren't linking it to anything that we needed to take out. Oh, Jesus destroyed the enemy. Well, if that's the case, why is Peter talking about a roaring lion that's waiting to have you? And that's all in the New Testament, long after Jesus was crucified. Okay, so we've got to put this in its right context and get it right. I studied that really in great depth and learnt about it and have lectured on it extensively around the country. But it's all part of my training so that I can lecture on it today. Okay, so it was while I was in the Zulu Scouts that I became smitten with a sweet young creature who passed me by, and her name was Merlene, and we got married and we've been together for about 37 years now. Okay, so I'm sure many of you know her. After I left the Zulu Scouts, when my time was up in the army, I was asked to come back in because a lot of our country was being invaded now and we're being taken over by the enemy, and our troops have been withdrawn and put into other areas, and we're external trying to stop them from coming in and so on. So I then operated as a mercenary, going back into those areas where our troops had handed that over to the enemy, and I was in those zones with no backup. Okay, that was the thing. You had to be special forces and you had to be able to operate on your own, or was a team of you, but there was no air force, there was no one else looking after you, and you could go in there and fight those terrorists. As an entrepreneur, to me, not using my gift within the right or wrong context, that was an awesome opportunity because I'd been a regular soldier earning $365 a month after 8 years. Now suddenly I had to go back in, or I had the opportunity to go back in and earn, you know, $1,000 for a kill, $500 for an AK, $1,000 for a landmine, $500 for a capture, for capturing a terrorist, and so on. And out of that, I was very successful at that, and out of that I was able to fund a large fishing company, commercial fishing company, and I also was able to acquire 2 mines and turn them into operational mines. The war ended in 1980, and when it ended, the SAS packed up and left in a group, okay? The whole lot as one column with their families, kids, children, armed column, left and went and joined the South African Army, now expecting to have to invade Rhodesia under the new communist or socialist regime as it turned out to be. The Zulu Scouts were disbanded and then they went back to their farms and back into the bush where they came from. The white population was disarmed. There were 2 factions that fought against us, 2 separate tribes, Robert Mugabe's tribe and Joshua Nkomo's tribe. As soon as the war ended, Mugabe's lot won the war, just one man, one vote. They were in superior numbers. They turned on their other tribe, as they always do in Africa. Bloodbath, 30,000 of them were killed in 1 week. Okay, it's called the Red Brigade, very famous thing. But by that time, I still had the 2 mines, and I sold the fishing company because I wanted to see what's going to happen. I actually stayed in Rhodesia when most of the special forces left. I stayed behind to give it a go. Mugabe was promising there wouldn't be a witch hunt and we could all live happily ever after. It wasn't the case. He's prone to telling fibs, is our boy Robert. And of course he set about plundering the nation for his own personal gain, and at the same time searching my house and all the time, regularly, and just harassing us all the time. So with all of this harassment and the decline in the economy, we decided that we needed to look overseas for a market for the mines, for the sapphires that we were mining. At that point in time, in 1982, Mugabe's government, the socialist government, formed a mineral marketing board. They compelled us to sell our produce, our sapphires, to the marketing board. They put the price down, they put the minimum wages up, and they deliberately put all the junior miners out of business overnight so they could nationalise the mines, take them for themselves. So what we did is we took a camera full of sapphires and we came to Australia for a 3-month holiday. That was all. So we were only allowed to come out of the country for 3 months, could only get a 3-month visa in Australia, and strange enough, we could only bring 300 Zimbabwe dollars per family, and they were worth nothing anyway. Okay, so we came here on the holiday. We couldn't give the sapphires away. It was 1982. The place was in a bit of a recession, and it was now time for us to go back to Zimbabwe. But while I was here, I was accused of blowing up a squadron of British Hawk jets back at one of Mugabe's airfields. So 12 Hawk jets were on loan from Britain to help rebuild the Zimbabwe Air Force. Somebody blew them up, okay, and they were blown up before Merlin and I came to Australia. But, and they scratched around to find who did it, and eventually they decided, well, who could have done it? So I'm one of the last SAS guys left in the country. I did that all the time in the SAS. Now I'm out of the country all of a sudden. Where am I? It must be him. Let's grab him and hang him. And of course, my mother phoned me just before we were leaving Australia to go back, and she said that she'd just been strangled. They're trying to interrogate her on a farm, and said, you can't come back. They're waiting for you at the airport, and they are going to hang you, and it's a big deal here. So I could never go back. Okay, so now here I am stranded in Australia. I can't get into Australia as a refugee. Merlin's going back to Johannesburg to pick up our children. That's in South Africa, so she's safe. My plane goes straight back to Harare Airport where they're waiting to hang me. So we said goodbye in Sydney together, and she went her way, I went my way. We never knew if we were ever going to see each other again. But of course the plane stopped in Singapore to refuel, and when I got to Singapore I just jumped off there and I went and said, hey, I'm a tourist, can I come in and have a look around? They said, yes, you can have 2 weeks, and they gave me a 2-week visa. And so I took off into where I knew there was a commercial diving company, American company, but the operations manager was ex-New Zealand Special Forces. And so I went there and I literally lied my way into a job. I just thought, oh, the best diver you've ever had, and can I have a job? And he just looked at me and laughed and said, get in the workshop, because he knew all the Rhodesians were desperate. I had no qualifications. I was totally lying. I wasn't a Christian then, so you can tell lies. And so I just said, you can just come in the workshop. And the beauty of us to them, the reason we're beneficial is simply because we were so desperate. We would do anything. We were not unionised. We were disciplined because we were all ex-military. And we just did what we were told, irrespective of what we were told to do. So he thought I'd be a great hand in the workshop. So it was in the workshop that I learned to dive. When everybody went home at night, I was desperate to get my wife and kids out of Africa. If Mugabe got one of them, I had to go back. So I needed to learn to dive. I needed to make a diving wage, not a workshop wage, to be able to start from scratch. Okay, you've got to remember, I'm stateless. I have nothing. I have no money, no clothes. When you go on holiday with your wife, one suitcase, everything in that suitcase was hers, has now gone to South Africa. I just got my, thongs to wear, and that's about it. So there's my gift coming in, to be able to just start again. That's what an entrepreneur can do. That's the way God designed me, and that's what I was using it for at the time. Now, I taught myself to dive, and once I was able to dive, somebody came in and went out before me. I said to Merv, the ops manager, I said, "Hey Merv, how come he went out ahead of me?" And he said, "Because he's a medic. We have to have a medic in every one of the saturation chambers." And I said, "Well, I'm a medic. I was in the SAS." And by then, Minister wasn't lying. And he said, "Oh, I never thought of that." Yeah, and our training was much better than the emergency medical technicians that they were using. But by law, they had to have one. And it was probably the only law in the diving world in Southeast Asia. It was the frontier, the Wild West of diving. It was one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. All the diving gear was obsolete gear from the North Sea, and so on, totally unregulated, unqualified people, no barriers to entry. That's why I got in, otherwise I wouldn't have got in, and so on. But the point being, within 3 months of getting that job, less than 3 months of getting that job, I got onto a saturation system. I was sent to Japan, 400 feet below the oceans, 35 days at a time. Had no idea what I was doing, but I was earning $1,000 US a day in 1982. There's the gifting, there's the entrepreneurship coming through in incredibly adverse conditions. Within 6 months, I got Merlin out to Singapore, make sure she was capable and loved it and whatnot, and we could be together. So we went straight back, got all the kids and what we could, which was just 2 suitcases, and within a year I had my family now in Singapore safe from Mugabe's hands. And then it took us 3 years from there to get into Australia. When I got to Australia, I bought a motorcycle business in Perth. We just landed in Perth randomly. We chose it off a postcard. Then I saw one other Aussie who was diving with me. I saw people windsurfing in Perth on the Swan River. I said, "Yeah, that looks awesome." Sent a telegram to my wife. Said, "Hey, when we go to Australia, let's go to Perth. Look at nice windsurfing." That's literally how we selected it. Nothing mattered. So we got there, and I bought a motorcycle business. I knew nothing about motorcycle businesses. I just liked motorcycles, and I bought the business. That business, I paid $80,000 for it, 40 grand in cash, and I gave the vendor a Mercedes-Benz that we brought in from Singapore, which was worth 40. That was an $80,000 purchase. Within 2 years, on the third financial year, we took that company to a $2 million company, and we kept it that way until we sold it. There's the gift, okay? I'm not a good businessman, but I'm a good entrepreneur, and I can grow stuff. It was in Perth that I became a Christian. So I'm talking about all our life's experiences. Now my experience as an entrepreneur actually in business is starting to build, because in the modern era we've built Paladin Corporation as a $1 billion company and growing very fast. I needed to be trained to do that. I had no idea how to grow a $1 billion company. These are all the strands of life's experience, being trained up for what God had for me down the track. Okay. In Perth, I used to go to church with my wife, with Merlin. She was a strong Christian, and I never went. I didn't believe what I heard at church, but I went because I loved her and I wanted to please her, and also Christians are pretty gullible. It was easy to sell them motorbikes. So I had most of the Christian customers, and I was a bikey type. But it was good. But one day Reinhard Bonker was coming to town, and he was running a big crusade in the city, in the entertainment centre. And Merlin was hassling me to go and watch this guy and listen to him, and you'll identify with him, he comes from Africa and all this stuff. She just wanted me to get saved. And she worked on me, and I want to tell you, she's a worse terrorist than any terrorist I ever met. She will wear you down until you surrender. And eventually I surrendered and said, "Okay, we're going, but here's the rules, all right? We're going there, we're not going in any company cars. I do not want your limp-wristed Christians. I don't want the motorcycle fraternity to see me with you limp-wristed Christians. We're going to go in last. When the lights are off, we sit by the door. When the lights come on, we make swastikas out of there, get some escape and evasion going, and we're gone." And she said, "That's fine. I just want you to come with. I just want you to listen to him." So I did that. We went in a private car, no company badging, went late, got in last, took the seats right by the exit, and that place filled up even more. It was even people standing, 6,000 people plus. And Reinhard Bonker's down on the stage there, and he can't see, there's one light in his face, it's black, the audience. And he's been going for quite a while preaching, and he just stopped. And then he just looked straight up the aisle, he pointed straight to where I was by the door, and he said, "Up there's a young executive in the motor industry." He said, you're here under duress tonight. He said, he said, the Lord has knocked on your door many times, and tonight could be the last time. So come now, come now. And he was referring to the fact that I'd been going to church for years, sitting there thinking, oh, what a lot of baloney. And every time the visiting pastor comes through, God sends them an email and says, hey, he's not saved, get Hodgson saved. And every time they give an altar call, they stare at me and I look away, and there's a little squeeze on my hand and I pull it away. I just didn't want to be a Christian, and I didn't believe what was going on. So Bonky, the Lord had shown him and said, this guy, the Lord I've knocked on his door many times, and this time will be the last time. So I said to Merlin, wow, do you think he's talking about me? And she said, well, what do you think? It's pretty obvious to her. Anyway, I said, I think it's a setup. I think your disciples down there have set me up for this. And anyway, Bonky's impatient. Come on, come on. So I went down, lights are coming on, everyone's standing, clapping, because now here's a salvation for them, and it's a big deal. I went down there, I forgot I was supposed to be clandestine, but I went down there to go and check it out, and there was nobody from Merlin's church. And that's how I became a Christian, and sent out the back for counselling and so on. But you know what? Then, from then on, that wasn't me getting assignment. That was just me getting saved. And then I became a generic Christian. I learned that I needed to fund the kingdom as a business guy. I don't need to build my church. That just be generic. I didn't need to do anything else. Just make sure the church got some money. It didn't close its doors and that sort of stuff. And I did that for years. Later on, we moved from Perth over to the Atherton Tablelands in far north Queensland. And there we started up more businesses. I loved the Atherton Tablelands. It was awesome. I was funding my church. I was on the board of the church. I loved going in the bush there. I was teaching people all about creation and evolution and all that sort of stuff and so on. But that all changed in the year 2000. So by then I'd been there about 11 years, just a generic Christian, just enjoying life. In 1998, my pastor, it was 98 to 99, the pastor who had been there roughly the same length of time as me, he was transferred away to Caloundra on the Sunshine Coast to go and help rebuild a church that was in financial distress. My son was going to go and join him. My son had married his daughter, and my son and his daughter were going to go and join them in a few months. But one of the elders of the church came to me and he said, Dave, I had a dream last night, I had a vision last night. And he said, there was this couple that came from Africa, and they stood with Pastor Dan and Anne. So by name, Pastor Dan and Anne. This is a prophetic word. This is me getting my assignment, okay? Really important. He stood with Pastor Dan and Anne, and they built a mighty church. And then he turned to walk away and said, John, come back here. No, he didn't. And he said to build a mighty church. And I said, John, that's awesome, because Storm and Shelley are going soon. Storm's a youth pastor. Shelley's a music director. Awesome, young, good-looking couple to go and help the pastor. What more could he want? And John said to me, no, your daughter-in-law Shelley, she's an Aussie girl. This couple came from Africa. It's you and Merlin. You're the only couple in this church straight from Africa. And so he turned and walked away. And that's when I said, John, come back. And he looked at me and he said, that's all I know. You deal with it. I thought, thanks. Now, I had to deal with it. Okay? If somebody was teaching on assignment like Dave Leslie has been today, if somebody had explained that to me, I wouldn't have wasted the next 2 years going broke. But what happened was, I thought in my head, well, if I leave this church, remember, I'm on the board, I'm funding the church, I can see how much money's coming in. If I leave this church, it's going to collapse, because I'm by far the biggest funder of this church. So I think either John's got it wrong, God's got it wrong, or something. I didn't think I've got it wrong, how can I be wrong? As it happened, I was the one who was wrong. John was right, God's never wrong. Anyway, over the next 2 years, I had this large mobile phone company. This was before the day of smartphones. I was busy selling the old big bricks, but mostly we were selling plans, because that was what you needed to sell, and the phone companies gave the hardware. So I was selling plans. So all the telemarketers were all over there in the Tablelands, the offices in Cairns, office of Tablelands. We're reaching the whole of the far north, selling plans to people. And all of a sudden, they were going to bring out these prepaid cards and smartphones. So the big dealers, the carriers, all came to me one by one and said, Dave, you're one of our best dealers, we don't want to lose you. You're going to have to shut all these offices down, get a retail shop downstairs, because all of ours are upstairs where it's cheaper, and have a shop front and sell hardware and prepaid cards. We've done this overseas, we know you won't survive. Well, I couldn't, because I had all these leases going, and my mindset was, I'm funding the kingdom, so God will look after me. But God didn't look after me, simply because I wasn't in his will. This is so important. I was doing good things, but I wasn't doing God things, because I didn't know that God had given me an assignment, and it came through that prophetic word from John. Okay, so over the next 2 years, my business wound down to zero. The Lord was quite happy letting this happen. He wanted my attention. He wasn't getting it. Okay, best place to, if if you want to get the attention of an entrepreneur, just shut down the cash flow, go for the hip pocket. That's exactly what happened. I don't know why it took 2 years. I think, well, King David took 3 years to say to the Lord, hey, Lord, why is there a famine in the land when the Lord wanted the covenant with the Gibeonites restored? You know, me, it only lasted 2, so that's good. But the point being, eventually I had sold everything. I had drawn cash off my credit cards to pay for my wages, my people's wages and everything else. And eventually we had no money, we had no assets, we had no clothes, we had no furniture, we had nothing. We'd sold the whole lot. And finally we wound up the business. We didn't go bankrupt, but we were totally broke. We had one old Land Cruiser that was boiling every 3 hours or so, just about caught fire. But we decided we better jump in that, we better go to Caloundra and do what God told us to do. Anyway, it took 3 days to get there, starving, no food, 1 loaf of bread between 5 of us for 3 days. It was a mess. But ultimately, when we got here, I was only here for 3 weeks, 3 weekends, okay? And Pastor Dave MacDonald came through the church and he called me out of the audience. So he didn't know me. He's a big shot. He's in charge of he's a state director of Christian Outreach Centre. And he calls me out of the audience and he said, you, sir, the Lord has shown me that there's finances written all over your life and you will write 6-figure checks for this church. Now, here's the thing. Up to that point, I thought I'd come there to build a church. You know, you will stand with Pastor Dan and Anna and build a mighty church. I'm thinking bricklaying and putting on roofs and stuff because we had just built the church up at the Atherton Tables. We physically built it. I had trucks. We had carted all the stuff. We all built it together. The church congregation built the building. So I'm thinking, oh, gee, this is my future. And now God's telling me to build churches. That's what I'm here for. Nah, wrong. Nothing to do with my life's training, okay? My life's training has all been in business development, financing, stuff like that, all the stuff. By then, lots of businesses, all around about $2 million each. So the Lord was saying, now you need to write 6-figure checks for this church. And that was my assignment getting confirmed. That was a confirmation I wish I'd had 2 years earlier. I wish somebody had taught me 2 years before that, and I didn't have to go broke. But it was good training. And as an entrepreneur, and most of you guys as business people are all entrepreneurs at different levels of concentration. Mine's just a higher concentration than most. We all can start again the next day, and that's exactly what we did. Now that we knew what we had to do, we could look at this lot and just say, okay, let's go home and find out what we got to do, and find out how to write a 6-figure check for the church. And that's what I did. As I sat down with Merlene, we went through the newspaper, we found that Aussie Home Loans was advertising for a finance broker, and I needed to actually get that job because I wanted to learn how the banks worked. But I had no clothes, I had no skills, I was unsophisticated, and yet I'm going to try and get this job. And they narrowed it down from hundreds of applications to 20, all on the phone, even doing psych tests on the phone. You know, I don't scrub up well on a psych test. I just left stuff out. I never lied because I'm a Christian. I just didn't tell the whole story. But either way, the point being that I got narrowed down to that 20. And so I went for the appointment, the interview, with all of them, 20 at once. And I had to borrow Pastor Dan's clothes. And Pastor Dan, I'm short, he's even shorter than me. I had to borrow all of these clothes. And Dan, if I'm going to refund your church, I want your jackets and your longs and your dressing, because I'd sold all my clothes. By then, I was a builder's labourer. I was taking home $5 an hour, literally, okay? So I had not bought any clothes yet. I had kids at school. It was just mission impossible to write a $100,000 check for the church. It was like, you've got to be kidding. How am I going to do this? But the point is, it was with all the confirmation, and suddenly it was a case of, okay, I will just find a way. So give us your clothes and I will go and do this. So I went there with this jacket that was up half to my elbows, you know, ratty clothes all coming from the St. Vincent's, looked like, you know, some feral that was dragged in from Coranda. And I walked in this meeting, I got there late. All the others are sitting in this room, all fancy, dressed up, dolled up, you know, with ties on. My tie was a dressing gown cord, I think, from Dan. It was just a mess. And there's women there with their long eyelashes also looking for the job. And I just thought, oh my word, one look at this. And I turned and walked out. You know, I was just terrified of the whole thing. And the lady said, sir, excuse me. I said, no, this is not for me, I'm out of here. And I went to the bathroom there and I was drying my hands in front of the mirror. And this is the most important bit for me in terms of finding my assignment, because this is where the Lord showed me all the dynamics that matter. Because he had brought me this far. I was in my late 40s, okay, from age 4 years old, I've been trained for this. And here I am, chickening out. Heavy SAS soldier, Selous Scout soldier, mercenary, operated behind enemy lines, infiltrated enemy, everything. And I'm frightened of these civilians' clothes. You know, what is this? And the Lord must have been saying, you know, what's wrong with this creature? Who do I have to train to do this now, to start again, you know, all these years? So I'm in this fancy bathroom, it's marble, it's tinted windows, there's music piped in, and just all of it was too much for me. And that was when the Lord, came into my world, and I just stood in front of that mirror. And you know what, it was the most amazing thing. It was like the Lord just sort of came there and showed me, and just sort of showed me my whole life. He showed me everything that had happened. It was like he was so angry, I suppose. And when I think about this, I think back to Moses when he wasn't going to circumcise his kid, and his wife Zipporah had to do it for him, and God was going to kill him. God had said, this guy's never going to cut it. Okay, and it sort of happened like that with me. It was like he intervened in the battle that was going on. It was a spiritual battle, and he intervened. And it was like he was in my head with a hammer, like bashing on my brain. It was painful, and it was almost like he was shouting at me. And the most important thing that he said to me, when he was giving me such a sermon, he said, "Where have you learned this fear from? I never taught you fear." And it was like when I think back of it, I never feared anything that we did. And God was saying, "I never taught you fear." Okay, and then in an instant he showed me all of the adversity that I'd faced over all the years, and my whole life flashed before me like those old frames of movies going through in the mirror in front of me. All the years as an infant at boarding school, the incredible rejection, the bullying, the train journeys, the fear of those train journeys initially, not the fear, but the missing the train. The train stopped at every big tree, and I ran off to go and play with the black kids who were trying to sell us stuff, and the trains were moving off, and I would run, catch on, and fall off and grab on again. All these things. Lost in the bush when I was 5 years old in the Belgian Congo for a long time, fighting the wars for 9 years in the special forces, all the contacts, the battles, seeing your mates blown away, parachuting into battle, everything's on fire, so many different things, getting blown up, my eyes were blown, both my ears were blown out. The years as a mercenary, sometimes fighting entirely on my own, operating on my own, literally. This is a fact, this is just what happened. Losing my baby son, my wife, my girlfriend, my whole vision in life gone, never ever to be seen again. The pain of them marrying someone else. Later in life, the plane, the one-way trip to get hung, no one on earth to help me, living in a city stateless totally, all these things. My very first dive in Singapore, up in Japan, the very first dive, I knew nothing about what I was doing, down on the bottom, and you can't come up, a giant octopus jumped on me, wrestled with me. You come up more than 80 feet, your blood fizzes, you're dead in a second. Another time I was diving again on that same 400 foot, up 35 days sat, my hot water dried up, went freezing, I drowned, I froze to death, had to be revived, and so on. All these things that happened, the Lord showed me in the mirror. He showed me my whole life's training, so vivid. It was like, read this, man. And that was when, I suddenly realized why I was there. And the Lord said to me that all the strands of adversity, these are the threads of my life that I have woven into a mighty rope that nobody can break if only you will be obedient and get out there and do my will. That's what he ended off with. And he just said, now get out there and take dominion. And that, guys, was the most profound moment of my life. So many weird things have happened to me, but that was just like, you just do not get a more direct instruction to do your assignment and to understand how it all fits together, to learn from it, to be able to teach from it. And that's why we've been teaching from it for so long. Okay, it was from that split second. Anyway, it was during that time, that split second, that I went from a feeble grasshopper in my own eyes to a general in God's army, and a spiritual identity came upon me that's never left me. And this is why I just know from all those years in the SAS and the Sleuth Scouts what such small groups can do massive things. And when you've got the favour of God with you, you can just multiply massive things and do them. Okay, so I went out with this newfound spiritual identity, and I took over in this thing, no matter how I looked on the outside, and I got the job. And then I went on and got that job in Aussie Home Loans, and Aussie Home Loans is a sales and marketing company. Okay, they're selling mortgages, but they could sell burgers and still be successful because they're sales and marketing oriented. That's what they train you. And I'm not a sales guy. It's foreign to me. It's not part of my skill set, not part of my natural gifting at all. I'm bad at it. I'm not even medium. I'm bad at it. But I broke their records month after month after month. And in my office now, there are just certificates from all those years ago, consecutive months, chronologically listed. And I'm not a sales guy. That was God applying the favour. And I want to tell you guys, in hindsight, from what I know now about finding your assignment, the favor, if you get the favor, it's because you're on assignment, because the favor goes with the assignment. It doesn't go with the individual. I've taught this for so long, and I wish people would learn this bit. Favor doesn't go with the individual. You know, if it did, we'd all be oozing favor, and we aren't. It goes with the assignment. And as soon as you engage it, doing the assignment is God's will, and as long as you do it His way, so His will, His way equals favor. And it's the favor that gives you the ability to do the assignment. Otherwise, the devil can stop you doing it, as I said right in the beginning. Okay? So, with that, I was finally about my father's business, and I was able to get out there and learn how all these banks worked. And I'm going to cut this short because I've nearly used up my time. But as I learned how all of this worked, the multiplication came, and it was massive. And at that time, by the time I got to actually arrive in Caloundra, I had $76,000 worth of credit card debt. I'd drawn cash off the credit cards to pay the last of my people's wages up in Atherton, and no assets but only that debt. And so now we went from here's normal, here's par. We were at, this is where I was, 76 grand in debt, to $100 million company in 2 years and 7 months, because we did our assignment, because God applied the favor, way beyond what I could possibly do myself. So that's how we grew from there. Now, here's an important bit about assignment. The Lord, sometimes maybe He'll give it to you all at once. In my case, it was way too big to give it to me all at once. So it came in stages. That was the first part of my assignment. Really important for most people that know KI to know. The Lord told me to fund my local church first. $100,000 checks for that church. A, it's going to build the church because it needs money, but B, it's going to provide a strong church because I'm going to need a spiritual covering. And if I fund it right now, right at the beginning, as a first port of call for your assignment, I will get a strong spiritual covering. And we did, and we have ever since, and we've taught on that, and we've pioneered this concept of spiritual covering right around the world. The lessons are on the KI membership site. The spiritual covering lessons, the spiritual due diligence lessons, and the finding your assignment lessons. Those 3 lessons are the ones that get the most comments, the most feedback, and the most, I'm asked to teach on those the most around the world. These are all KI pioneered concepts that other people have taken up and learned from, which is so good. Okay, my assignment grew because the Lord showed me that I needed to help fund very strategic initiatives involved in public policy around the country. That all stacked up always because I'm a strategic thinker. The guys in charge of these organizations were ex-special forces brigadiers and so on. We hit it off very well. They needed funding. I had the ability to create funding. My gift is to create wealth and so on. So I very quickly aligned with those as the Lord showed us more and more. Every time this happened, I sought the spiritual logic. I sought, does this line up with my gifting? Does it line up with my life's training? Look at those spiritual DD lessons that are on the membership site. You'll really love those, and they'll really help you find your assignment. I wish we had those. Even those are a lot of the 20 checkpoints that I use, even though they sometimes assume that you do have assignment, they will also help your assignment. So if you just read between the lines, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. So what happened next was the Lord showed me through 3 prophetic words. I'm thick-skinned, I need to be told 3 times. The Lord knows who I am, He knows. So He sent 3 prophetic people 2 weeks apart, so in 1 month phase, Sunday, 2 weeks later Sunday, 2 weeks later, another Sunday. You get told 3 times, you better know it's important. Joseph said if someone tells you twice, God means it, it's important. I was told 3 times. And the prophetic word was you need to go and counsel the kings. Okay, I didn't know anything about the kings in those days. I didn't know who they were. Is this Prince William? Is it Prince Harry? How am I going to get there? What am I going to say? We're going to get an audience with them. All this kind of nonsense. But I learned it was actually the business people. And the Lord showed me you have to teach them what you've learned. Teach them how to fund the church. Teach them how to fund strategic initiatives and so on. I didn't want to do that because I never liked being the center of attention. I don't like public speaking. I mean, I don't mind public speaking. I'm not scared of it. It's just that I don't like being the center of attention, and that's because of my nature and all that I learned growing up, even as a kid, being secret in the bush and then being in the special forces. Okay, but it made sense because I had the depth in the word as it applied to business. I had the ability to. I had a 500. I don't know. By then we're about a $300 million company. There weren't a lot of them around in the kingdom at that stage, and so on. And so I did that, and KI was born out of that. And now KI would be one of the most, if not the most strategic marketplace ministry in the world, with reach right around the world, because It was my assignment, it was confirmed, it stacked up, life's training, gifting, all stacked up, and came to that point where, yep, okay, I know what you mean. All right, just finishing off here quickly, there's so much more to talk about because God will take you off your vertical to do stuff. You've got to know that, and when he does that, that comes from intimacy, knowing to be able to hear the voice. We've got beautiful intimacy lessons on the website, so join up and have a listen to that. But in closing, guys, the last thing the Lord showed me was in 2011 when he said to me, okay, now I want you to create sheep nations on earth. Now this is the real assignment. So he built me up all this way by giving me chunks of, or tranches of assignment until we got to this point, 2011. Here's my whole audience before me, and I could see it changing before my eyes. I was told to go and, my original assignment was to go and train up the entrepreneurs. That's what the Lord had shown me to do, and that's what my pastor wanted me to do. So I was used to an audience of entrepreneurs from 2003-4 right up to 2011. So 8 years I've been training entrepreneurs, but it was starting to morph into a congregation. Mum and dads, tradies were there, employees were there, uni people were there, uni students, teachers, everything was all mixed up. I'm looking at this thinking, this looks like a congregation, Lord God. I don't want to be a pastor. What am I supposed to do with this? And that was when the Lord showed me that this concept of the sheep nations in 2011. Everyone knows about sheep nations long before then, but nobody put it into a modern era whereby we know what it looks like physically on the ground. And the Lord showed me how I had to do that. And he showed me I had 2 years to learn how to do that. And so the first thing I said to the Lord is, Lord, why me? And why Australia? Because the Lord has shown me Australia would be the first country. So this is part of finding your assignment. It's not an insult to say, Lord, why me? I'm not being rude to God. I'm doing my spiritual due diligence. I asked in an investigative way. When the Lord gave the plans to David to give to Solomon to build the temple, they were so intricate. He knew where everything, pomegranates above the doors, ivory goes there, columns, nameless one, Boaz, Jachin, whatever, everything he knew. I needed that. When I looked at this, I just suddenly thought, wow, Lord, why me? And the Lord showed me straight away, you're gifting dude, you're an entrepreneur. By now we had a 500 million, this is $500 million company. There's not that many of those around this country, and especially in the kingdom. You've passed all of these tests. You can carry the burden of wealth. I can trust you with the wealth. This is all that, and your life's training. When you kickstart the sheep nation, you're going to come under massive attack. You better be able to withstand the attack, because you are going to do what nobody has done for 3,000 years. The last guy to do this was Solomon in the 10th century BC, and he created a sheep nation, then trashed it, or nearly got there, and then trashed it through lust when he got onto all his, adopted the faiths of his 700 wives and 300 concubines. Okay, so now that's why the Lord showed me, Babylon is going to counterattack, because Babylon is entrenched in the marketplace. Greed and self-centeredness is going to come after you. You better be able to face it, and it did. Okay, with the ASIC, the corporate regulators, they attacked my integrity and everything else wrongly. Okay, but nevertheless, I needed some kind of a confirmation on this. So I said, okay, awesome, Lord. I'll do this. You've said it's my gifting. I've got this massive audience with KI, and I've got a $500 million company. But $500 million is never going to do it, Lord. You gave Solomon like caravans of gold and this and that, and he was the richest guy who ever lived. And above that, you gave him all this wisdom. I'm just some guy who got thrown out of school when I was 16. How am I going to change the whole world like this? I'm going to change governments. I'm going to change the secular world, infiltrate their minds and their hearts, and change all of that. So I'm busy bleating and whinging about this, asking, nicely, not rude. I don't want to be stood down again. 3 weeks later, I went to the US to go and listen to a conference. And the only reason I went there is because I now know what God's telling me to do. I better go around the world and learn what other people are doing, and are they doing what we're doing, what the Lord's just taught me to do. So I never went there as a speaker. I went there to go and sit and listen. And so when I did that, I went and sat. I went to a place just outside of LA. It was a massive conference. There's like 105 or something speakers there. And I'm sitting very quietly up in the far corner of the stadium. It's huge, and I'm sitting on a big, big church where they had this thing. And it's all marketplace stuff. The very first guy who got up to speak gave an awesome message. Now, I know that guy. This is Dr. Francis Miles. He he'd spoken at KI many years before that. So I knew him. And but he didn't know I was there, okay? But I'm sitting up in the back corner. He's given a whole thing as foundation for the conference. And the conference leader said, okay, now Dr. Miles, can you just prophesy over the whole lot of us so we can get on with it? And he said, yep. And he's waiting and waiting. And they said, you better hurry up. Yeah. And he just looked up at the whole stadium and said, Dave Hodgson, are you here? And I just froze. And the bloke said, "Yep, I'd be here." And he said, "Okay, come." So I had to go back down again, deja vu. Anyway, I get down the bottom there, and he grabs me, held me like a firefighter does. And I could feel he's a little bit nervous about this. And he said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you something." He said, "The Lord has shown me that you're going to, He's going to give you the wisdom of Solomon, and you're going to control almost as much wealth as Solomon." And he said, in the same sense, he said, "And we must have lunch together." So we had lunch together, and he said, "What is that?" You know, he said, I was so reluctant to tell you that. He said, "It's just crazy." And he said, "The reason I said nearly as much as Solomon, because the Bible said no one would ever have as much as Solomon. But that's what the Lord showed me. Do you know where it's coming from? Do you know what it's for? Do you know how to get it?" And I said, "I absolutely know what it's for." I said, "I don't know where it's coming from. I know how to use it." And I said, "I'm pretty sure I can get it." So that, guys, in closing, was another confirmation. Look for that confirmation when you're doing. That's why when we do Find Your Assignment seminars like you're sitting on now, we have the prophetic people at the end, because the prophets are the ones who can confirm this for you. All right? It's not just a show space. So I really encourage you guys today, enjoy the rest of the day. Go hard for your assignments. Take them seriously. Measure them through once you've got them. If there's favor coming, awesome, you're on assignment. If there's no favor, why me, Lord? Do a spiritual due diligence, do a spiritual audit of yourself. My next lecture that's going up on the KI website is going to be how to audit yourself when there's no favor coming or when the enemy seems to be overcoming you. Okay, I've done this many times, and it's also never lectured on it, but I will. Okay, so God bless you guys, and I truly hope that by the end of the day, you will have your assignment. Cheers for now.
Okay, I hope you got some good stuff from that. Just a short 1.5 hour testimony. Dave told me he'd be about half an hour, but that's okay. 1.5 hours is good. So we're going to have a very quick break now. We are still running a little bit behind schedule. I just want to mention someone has a BMW that's blocking a guy out there. The number plate is 336XNJ. I think I may have got that wrong, but there's a BMW out there that's blocking someone. So if that's you, if you could go move your car, that would be great. Let's have a 5-minute break now. Grab a coffee, toilet break, and then let's get back into it to finish the day off. I just want to give you a schedule of what's going to happen now over the next sort of bit of time. We are running a little bit behind schedule, so I just wanted to check with everyone here. We want you guys to be prophesied over, true? Yes. Yeah, the answer is yes. So in order to do that, we've got a great team that have come here today to prophesy over you. Now, because there's approximately 80 of you in the room, we're going to allow around 3 minutes per person. Okay, we have to be a bit militant and we're practical about this. We need to be out of the room by 5 o'clock, obviously, so it is going to take a bit of time to get through everyone. Take about 70 minutes. So if you want a word, if you have to go, please go, okay? But I would say, I hope and pray that you hang around for your prophetic word. Is that okay with you guys? So what we're going to do now, Simone has condensed her testimony down to 10 minutes. From an hour, and I've condensed my testimony down from 10 minutes to about 5 minutes. So from an hour to 5 minutes, okay, to get through it, and then we're going to lead into prophecy very soon, okay? So Simone has an awesome testimony. Please welcome her as she shares.
Thank you so much. Okay, lots to get through, lots of words to get through a little hole, so let's go. I grew up in a middle-class family in Sydney, and both my parents had experienced the war in some way. My mum was English, she still is English. Well, actually, she's Australian now. Anyway, her father, my grandfather, was a spy in MI5 in Britain, in England, and during the war. And he was after the war, he actually was still working, and the British family got transferred to Germany straight away. So you can imagine what that would be like as a young child, because he then had to go and round up the war criminals during that time. So here was this young family of, you know, very English speaking people and children in a very hostile environment. Lots of things happened there that were pretty scary, but what that did to my mum was put her for the rest of her life in a post-traumatic stress phase where she would have loved to really connect with people, but found that really hard. One of the reasons was her best friend was a little Jewish girl when she was there, and she saw her murdered before her own eyes and was very lucky to get away herself. So these things affect us, obviously. I'm now a neurostrategist, so I understand how we make meaning of the world and how we subconsciously take events into our mind, and then we make assumptions of how the world works. Anyway, all that to say, she then became a woman that loved people but found it hard to love people, if that makes sense. So my relationship with my mum was very strained. It was fine until I was about 5, and then for some reason something happened and we were very distant from then. My father was German. So he also grew up post-war, etc. His father was a prisoner of war, a German prisoner of war. So his outlook on life was actually quite interesting. He moved out to Australia when he was 18, and his outlook on life, having grown up in lack, was just lavish. And you know how I think David mentioned before, we can either go in the same way as some pattern, or we can go completely opposite. So he chose completely opposite. He actually was a very, very generous man. He was all about life and parties and whatnot, and just having a good time and enjoying the moment. But again, grew up without a father, so wasn't really emotionally connected to us children, because he never had that modelled to him, because his father was away being prisoner of war. Now, I happened to be sexually abused when I was very young, under the age of 5, and it was not dealt with very well at all. Well, it just wasn't really dealt with. It was told, okay, that's innocent kids exploring and it just happens. And so what that did for me on the inside was completely invalidated my soul that had been torn in two. That I just felt abandoned, abused, unworthy, unloved, and just like a piece of garbage, actually. So, as I mentioned, my father was into life and partying and, you know, happy times, and so alcohol was pretty free-flowing in my household, and unfortunately it was used not only as a party element in the 70s but also as a form of escapism. Now, my parents were very liberal in the fact that they were really actually loving parents, and they were great providers, and they both worked really hard. But their philosophy on raising children was, if they're going to experiment and do stuff anyway, then in some unsafe environment, then we may as well allow them to do that in our house. So consequently, there was a lot of parties that I was the youngest, I had an older brother as well that lived, well, I have two, but one that lived with us at the time. And so there was a lot of parties at our house, and I realised when I was in my early 20s that it wasn't normal to get drunk with your parents at the age of 12. So my background was quite colourful. As I mentioned, alcohol was used also as an escapism, not only in my parents' life, but obviously in my own life as well, after what I'd been through in such a young age, and it was just not dealt with. It was swept under the proverbial rug, and I just had to learn to cope with that, because the message that I was getting was, you should be fine, like, what's wrong with you, you know, like, get on with it. So there was this torment on the inside of me that I'm falling apart, I literally felt like my soul was ripped in two, but it wasn't valid to feel that way. It's like, you should be fine, just move on, this stuff happens, you know. So that was an early insight into my world. What this did for me, so this is life experience, again I'm trying to narrow it down in such a short period of time, but what this life experience did for me was it showed me how the mind worked. One of my natural giftings is I am an experiential learner. David also mentioned that I'm a listener, I'm a why learner as well. So often what I find God does to me is he takes me through things, and I definitely use the word through because he takes us through the valley of the shadow of death. He doesn't let us stay there, we always walk through it, but there is such a lot to learn when we walk through that valley of the shadow of death. And I love the fact that it's the valley of the shadow of death. It's not the valley of death. It's the valley of the shadow of death. And I don't know about you, but the shadow of a dog has never ever bitten anyone that I know of. So we walk through that valley of the shadow of death, but there's a lot to learn along the way. One of the greatest things that I've learned in life is our biggest trials will give us our biggest gifts if we are prepared to see them. But not only see them, if we're prepared to accept them, because we know that God does not waste anything, and all this stuff really is training if we will see it for that and accept it for what it is. So by the time I was in my teens, I was depressed. I didn't like anyone to know that side of me, so I wasn't one that was trying to get attention from other people. I tried really hard to cover it up. I struggled with it every moment of every day. And I was constantly, I think, I had this total juxtaposition inside of me, because the one thing that I wanted, and I desperately wanted in life, was to be loved. I just wanted to be loved. It was like I needed to be validated that I was worthy of being loved, because up to that point, my life experience, we have, as I'm a neurostrategist now, and we have these things called if-then statements that we subconsciously run off. So, for example, if you eat your dinner, then you can have dessert, right? It starts at a young age, and these then becomes rules that we live by. But there's some more complicated ones, like if I was abused, then I'm clearly not worthy, right? I'm not worth much. Or if I'm abused, then that means I'm worthless. So I had these connections going on, these neural programming in my mind. What we also do is we tend to take an external event, and we can then subconsciously internalize it, and it can become part of our identity. It's a lie, and there's a lot of lies in our internal neural programs around our worth, but if they're programmed in there, they are our reality, and we will produce results that either limit, block or sabotage our success and the success of the assignment on our lives, because we're believing these lies and they're our reality. We will outwork and produce results from them, but it doesn't mean that they're the truth. So I was running off these lies that were my reality, that I'm not worthy of love. And then you have these train stations that you kind of go to. So the first train station for me was clearly I'm not worthy of love. So then you think about that for a while, and then the next train station became, well, then I'm obviously not worthy of life if I'm not worthy of love. See the if-then statements. If I'm not worthy of love, then I'm not worthy of life. So it's kind of this downward spiral that I was on. And by the time I was late teens, early 20s, I was then suicidal because I didn't believe I was worthy of life. And I completely struggled with this. I don't know if anyone really knew what was going on in the inside, because on the outside, I still desperately wanted to be loved. And I had the goals, like I had done all the Tony Robbins stuff, right? And so I'd written them down, I'd visualised them, I'd put the plan on the walls, and I was reading it daily and whatnot. So again, this conflict, that one part of me had this goal that I want to go to, and I want to be loved, and I want to have a great life, but internally and in my mind and in my neural programming, I just was not worthy of that. So there was a constant sabotage going on in my life, and especially on the assignment of my life as well. One of the first jobs I got was in television presenting, actually. I was actually there. I was headhunted from the course that I was doing, and I got offered a position as a marketing manager for a direct marketing company who happened to put their products on Good Morning Australia and a few other major television programs nationally in Australia. So I did that, and then one morning one day the presenter rang and said that they were sick and they couldn't do the 6 a.m. shoot with Bert Newton the next morning. So my boss called me in and said, can you do it? So my personality was say yes and panic later. So of course I said yes and thought, give me the script and I'll go home and I'll panic about that later. So I went home and I learnt the script, and I found that I had a bit of a knack for it. So again, that was a natural gifting that God had given me to remember the script and then to be able to have a conversation with Bert and talk about the product. And I found I actually quite liked it. So there was that gifting, natural gifting coming out as well. And from there, they then expanded my networks and whatever. So then I just became one of their presenters as well as the marketing manager. So that opened different opportunities, and God was using those skills, that life training of presenting, for what I still didn't know it was to be my assignment, but he was using those skills and training me there. The thing was, I was still depressed and suicidal at this time. I just had to wear this mask of confidence to function in life and to actually get through every day, but I would generally cry myself to sleep. One night, I was completely afraid of people as well, which was rather interesting in my job. Family would ring and I would never call them back because I was just even afraid to speak to even my family over the phone. I was just so full of fear, so full of unworthiness, just riddled with anxiety. The inside was just a mess. I kind of describe it like meeting a ferociously frightened kitten in a dark alley that would just shred you if you got close. That was what it was like on the inside of me. One night I actually attempted to take my life, and clearly that didn't go so well. And in the morning I woke up and I was just like, you know what, you're so pathetic. Like you can't even do that. What a failure are you? Like how pathetic are you? So but one of my natural giftings was survival, because I had to survive a lot. So I had learned how to pick myself up regardless of how I felt and survive, just get through it. I have a natural gifting of endurance as well. So I picked myself up, I put on my little Barbie suit to go into the studio, you know, whatever, and matching briefcase, and I literally collapsed in front of the elevator because I could not do it in my own strength anymore. And I couldn't suppress it, I couldn't keep it down, I couldn't hold it in, and I literally just fell apart. And during this time I said, God, if you're real, you have to help me because I cannot do this on my own anymore. And from that point I made a decision to actually listen. And as David said before, that's actually what my name means. The name Simone means she who hears, or the listener. And God has gifted me in that area of just being able to hear and to be able to pick up the intonations and tonalities and people's voices and what they're really saying as opposed to what the words are saying. So I decided to listen, and I it was a choice to deliberately put myself in nature a couple times a week at least. So here comes the intimacy. It was a choice. Intimacy is a choice for us. It will not just happen. We have to deliberately fight for intimacy with Christ. And so I would sit a couple of times in nature each week, and I would have pen and paper, and I would say, right, God, tell me something that I don't understand. Just speak to me. And I'd be waiting. And I'd see a bird land on a branch, and I'd go, great, what does that mean? And he would unfold these stories to me. And I don't have time to go into a lot of them, but anyway, so he would unfold these stories and he would talk to me, and it was this time of intimacy with the Lord that literally saved my life, because each story, each metaphor he was unfolding for me was telling me and teaching me who I am through his eyes. So remember I was talking about the lies. I was running off lies. They were my reality, and he had to clean those lies out and he had to replace it with the truth. So he was brainwashing me. Which I'm very thankful for. We all need a good brainwash every now and then. And so it was during that time I would write these down, and he was putting me back together piece by piece. So the spiritual and emotional healing was happening, but I also wanted to know why I was such a nutcase. So I decided I'd go and study the brain. And what I found out was not what was wrong with me, but what was right with me, how the neural programmings work, what makes us unique, etc., like eating our eyebrows and whatnot. So again, it was this combination of like spirit, science and emotional, everything coming together, which was governed and led by God and by that intimacy time with God that was putting me back together. And I thought, you know what, if God can do this for me, then surely he would be able to do this for other people. And that started a whole path of me becoming a neurostrategist and helping others. Mind you, just to say, probably my time's up, but just to finish on this one thing, hopefully to encourage you, because I come from a completely different angle than, you know, the mighty Davids in the room. I mean, they are amazing, and some people are just born with the gift of entrepreneurialism, is that right? And communication. And confidence in who they are, and knowing God, and, you know, knowing the assignment of God on their life and going, right, well, let's just go and do it. I'm one of those ones that go, is that you, God? Is that me? Like, you know, like that's where I come from, the total fear-based, total unworthiness, you know. But just to show you that God can use absolutely anyone and everything and every aspect from, you know, and in between. So for me, a couple of things to end with. One, so when I'm writing these things down, and eventually God says to me, because he knew at the time I had this massive overwhelm pattern as well. So some people get their assignment full and like, right, go and do it. For me, it was just like little snippets at a time, right? So I'd written all these things out in my journal that he had shown me in my intimacy time with him, in my time with nature with him, all the stories, the metaphors that he'd shown me. And one day, I don't know, a year or two later, he goes, you should probably type them up. I'm like, oh, okay. Because I'm kind of simple. I'm like for the cornflakes in life, the simple things in life. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do that. So I eventually find the book and I type it up, and then he's like, you should give that to a few people to read and maybe suggest some edits or something. Okay, we'll do that. Right, okay, I can do that, no problem. Comes back, yeah, I can edit that. And then he goes, you need to publish that. So I go, no. Not going to happen. And so for the next 10 years, I had this edited book on my computer, and I asked for 10 years, who am I? Who am I to write a book? There's millions and millions of books out there. What do people want another book for? Who's going to care about my little, you know, adventures and healings and stories and whatever? Like, God, really, who am I? Like, and you can see I still had the Egyptian mentality, the slave mentality of I'm not good enough. And so he still had some cleaning up to do at this time. But so 10 years, he's so patient. I'm like, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Finally, at the end of 10 years, he goes, honey, it's not about you. Go figure. Hey? It's not about me. And he said, did you come up with those stories? I said, no. And he said, well, if the people don't like the stories in the book, it's not you that they're not going to like, is it? They're not going to like me. And I'm a big God and I can deal with that. So go and publish the book. I was like, oh, okay. So I share that because it's not about me. But if you're in that situation where you've been asking yourself, who am I to do this amazing assignment on my life, I want to tell you today, it's not about you either. It's all about him, okay? It's all about him. So in conclusion, at this time, I still didn't have the bigger picture of what I was going to do. He was kind of still in the healing phase of my life, but I was getting closer to him, and I was desperately wanting to do the assignment on my life that he had given to me. And one of the things I sing as well, and I thought, well, natural gifting, singing, maybe I'm going to be a singer, maybe it'll be, there was always kind of this calling on both of our lives to be a bit of a bridge from the church to the marketplace. And I thought, maybe I'll write a secular album, there'll be love songs, and when it goes to #1 around the world, like just small little goal, when I'm interviewed, I can tell people about Jesus, right? And that's how I can share the love of God. I thought, that'd be a great plan. So I'm pushing down that road and I hear this little familiar voice by then, what are you doing this for? And I said, well, God, because when the album goes to #1 and I'm interviewed, I'll tell people about Jesus and how amazing he is and he's the healer and lover of our soul and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, which I didn't feel was that encouraging. But anyway, so I just go, well, whatever, okay, we're pushing down this road. About a couple of weeks later, I hear this, so what are you doing this for? Which again, I thought was a bit strange because I thought God had a good memory. But I said, well, God, I did tell you that I'm doing it to eventually tell the world about Jesus. And he goes, Anyway, again, not too encouraging. A few weeks later, the same question comes back and I thought, okay, what's going on here? Maybe it's me that's not getting something here, maybe. So before I answered, I thought, why am I doing this? And I truly asked myself the question and I waited and it was like the truth answered. And I said to God, because I want to be loved. And he said, aren't you loved more than you already know and could ever imagine right now? And I went, yeah. So what that did for me was it showed me that sometimes what we think is our assignment and what we think is a good idea and it sounds good and whatever. If the motive isn't right, if it isn't a true and pure motive, then we could be a little bit off track because, as mentioned before, not all good ideas are God ideas. So from that moment, I started fasting because I'm like, okay, well, if that's not it, then what is it, God? And I had this absolute 100% sold out desire to know what the assignment was on my life to serve God. And I think we all have to, at times in our life, get to that 100%, no matter the cost, I'm in. Like, though you slay me, still will I worship you. So at that point in my life, I had another friend who was an amazing singer as well, and I just caught up with her and she'd got a great break in the industry, which I was really happy for her and I was genuinely happy. But I was still, on the inside of me, I'm like, but God, what is it for me? What have you got for me? And it was like my heart was breaking because I just wanted to know. And I excused myself after a little while. I went and sat in this park, which is normally pristine across the road from where we were. And a bin had been tipped over. And I heard this little, go and pick it up. So of course, what I did was started arguing. Is that you? Is that me? God, I don't know. Anyway, so I sat down for a few minutes, didn't get a response and thought, well, I suppose I'll go and do it and see what happens. So I start picking up the kind of relatively clean, chunky bits as far as rubbish goes, and I hear this, even the yucky, like really yucky little bits, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm bending down, and mind you, I'm in like suit and stockings and heels, so there I am in this grass, picking up all this sloppy rubbish and everything, putting it in the bin, and then I went and sat back down. I'm like, okay, God, can you just please tell me what that was about? And he says to me, I have called you to be like a garbologist. Woo! Beauty. Because just before then I had said to God, I don't care if you take my entire voice box, if I never talk again, let alone sing, but please tell me what it is that you have for me. So this whole thing unfolds and he said, yeah, I've called you to be a garbologist. What you will do is you will take the rubbish out of people's minds, out of neural program. You will take the lies that the enemy has fed them, that life and experience and hardships has fed them, and the lies that they've made meaning of the world and their assignment and their worth. And you will take that out, but not just the real big obvious ones, like even the really disgusting, yucky little ones that, horrible, you're going to take all that out. And what you're going to do is you're going to free them and give them breakthrough to be able to journey their assignment with me. So that's the call on my life, and that's how I found my assignment.
Thank you, wasn't that good? Nice little 10-minute overview. We'll have some counselling in the car on the way home. All right, so I've got 1 minute now for my testimony, and I am going to do it in 1 minute. I've never done it in 1 minute, so this is it. So God called me. He confirmed my assignment through prophecy and intimacy. It was 3 things. It was bridging the marketplace and ministry. It was crusades, and it was funding the kingdom. All right? Went through the pit experience. We lost $21 million, lost everything. God brought me back to intimacy, confirmed those 3 things in prophecies in 2011. God said he would restore everything. Basically what happened in a nutshell is we went to business. I started trading God's way in business, how we conducted business, how we dealt with suppliers. I had a very small childcare business that was left over from everything being taken. That business basically broke through. God gave me an idea standing out the front of it. This is where the influence and the favour is applied. It was something that cost me 17 grand and added $1 million of value to the business in 3 weeks. It came from God, it wasn't me. All right, then it started after that, and then things triggered after that. 2014, Dave said, I want you to teach with me around the world with KI. This is what I'm doing now. Going to be in about 7 or 8 countries over the next 3 months. This is what we do. We go around the world. I don't do it for money because we don't get paid. God took my allegiance away from the wealth, and he said, are you doing it for me or money? I said, I'm doing it for you. So we do this. We do this out of our own pockets, and we do it because we love Jesus and we want to see his kingdom manifested on the earth. Since that time, we've done about 19 crusades in Africa and kingdom economic summits like what I'm doing here today. And God has given me the privilege of touching literally millions in Africa and around the world. And I just can't thank Jesus enough. I love him. He is my Lord. He's my Saviour. And that is my testimony. I'm pretty sure that was 1.5 minutes. Okay, so this concludes the formal part of today. We're about to move into prophecy now. Before we move into prophecy, I just want to encourage you, every single one of you, from the summary of today, I want you to, I don't want you to, I believe the Lord does, spend time with him. He loves you so much. He wants that intimate time with you. That will reveal your assignment. If you don't get your assignment today, spend some time with him. Review the giftings and the life training, and review your prophecy that you received today. It's pretty simple, okay? If you want more teaching, I really encourage you to go to kingdominvestors.com.au. Again, our vision is to train up marketplaces in the world, marketplace leaders in the world like you, to usher in sheep nation throughout the earth. Let's join together to do it. I really encourage you. It's 80 cents a day or something ridiculous. Just join, get the teachings. There's dozens of teachings. They will radically change your life. Okay, before I just bring Matt up, I would just like to ask if there's anyone, Simone and I will be up the back as the guys start to prophesy. We take this all around the world. We're going to be over in Indonesia in a few weeks, and then later on in Europe, doing programs like this. And it helps if people have enjoyed today to give like a 1-minute testimony where we just ask you a question. And it edifies the teaching. Not us, not about Simone or I or Dave, but the teaching. Because we want to expand this around the world. Imagine if 2 billion Christians found their assignment and did it. The world would be saved in a day. We'd be all up in heaven celebrating. Okay, so if there's some of you that would take, if you wouldn't mind, those who feel prompted to do so, we only need maybe 3 of you to give a 1 minute, this is what I got out of the day. That would be wonderful. That would help us a lot.